here we are at the first video of our DNS series videos that you're going to absolutely love. So if you like it, please hit the like button or comment or even share. Best of all though would be if you subscribe, because you don't want to miss any of the excellent DNS bind videos that are coming your way. Now let's get on with the actual video.
Ever wondered how the internet actually knows where to take you when you type in a website, or how big companies like Google and Amazon control traffic across the globe? It's all DNS, and today we're going to show you how to build your own DNS server, a very powerful DNS server with Bind. This is part one of my Ultimate Bind DNS Mastery series, where I'm going to take you from absolute beginner to DNS expert, step by step. By the end of this series, you'll not only have a fully functional DNS server, but you'll also learn geo-based DNS, high availability, and even security best practices. So if you're ready to take your networking skills to the next level, hit like and subscribe, and let's get started.
Here we are at the DNS server CLI, the configuration screen for all the work that we're going to be doing today to build our DNS server. Now, I've already installed the applications. However, I will give you the command now that you will need to install the 3 applications, which are bind9, and that's the actual DNS server, bind9-utils, and that's useful debugging tools like dig, nslookup, host, etc., and bind9-doc, which is the documentation. So we'll do a sudo apt install bind9 space bind9-utils space bind9-doc, and we put a -y on the end of it so that we don't have to answer any of the questions that the apt will ask us for installation of programs. Now for me it's not going to do anything because, as I said, I've already installed it. So once you've installed it, please come back and we will continue. The first file that we're actually going to configure is a file called named.conf.options. Now, all of these files are held under the parent directory of etc. bind. Now, as you can see, I'm already in that. You can either go to that directory or you can via it, or whichever editor you're choosing. From external to that, just make sure you put /etc//bind and then the name of the file. For me, I'm going to vi this file because I like using vi. So sudo vi named.conf.options. And we are presented with this particular file and these configuration settings that are already in this file. Now, there are a couple of things that we need to do here. Now, we don't have to do this. However, it is better if you do, and that is to actually enter at the top of this file an access list, and that access list can be your trusted sources for recursion, and we'll go into what that is later. So I'm going to go to the top of the file and I'm going to do an escape I because it's vi, and I'm going to put a couple of spaces in there, and at the top here I'm going to put ACL, which stands for access list, and the name of the access list, well, I'm going to call it trusted, and then we're going to put in there open parentheses. Then we need to go across to under the S and we'll put in our addresses. So for me it's 192.168.56.60. remember to put semicolon, new line, and 192.168.56.61 semicolon. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up and I'm going to put a little bit of text in here to say what it is. So this will be our DNS server. This one will be our DNS client. And we obviously need to close off our parentheses with a semicolon as well after it. And that's the ACL completed for me because I've only got those 2 systems. The options directory can be left as it is, but we go 2 lines below that and we go across to under the D and we put in here recursion, yes, semicolon. Recursion means that anything that we're basically saying we will try anywhere to ensure that your request is met. So in other words, if a request comes in and our A record is not held here, but it might be held at Google or somewhere, we will forward this to Google to get a response back from Google to send to you so that you have that DNS conversion that you've asked for. So what we'll do is we'll tab across a little bit and we'll put in here enables recursive queries. And then we need another line, and in here we're going to put allow recursion trusted semicolon space close parentheses semicolon. And what we're doing here is we're saying trusted. Okay, so the only recursive systems we're going to allow are in our trusted ACL. So you see where that ACL is coming in useful now. So for me, it's just those 2 systems. And again, let's just put in a little comment. So we'll put allow recursive queries from our ACL. And we'll put in a new line. In here, we put listen on space, open parentheses. I'm putting the address of my server. You put the address of yours. Or you could put any in here, which is where we're saying listen on whatever network we're talking about here. So for me, I'm specifying my particular server. So 56.60 semicolon space close parentheses semicolon. And we'll put in here a little comment again saying private IP address of server. Then on a new line, we're going to say allow transfer space open parentheses none semicolon space close parentheses semicolon. And we're saying disable zone transfers by default here. In other words, we want any request to stay in this zone. Disable zone transfer by default. And that's the message that we'll put in there. The last thing we need to do in this file currently is we need to set up our forwarders, which are our Google DNS servers. Remember, the forwarders are for any requests that come in that our system locally does not know the A record for those requests. So in other words, it can't deal with the DNS request that's come in, so it has to forward it somewhere or drop it if the forwarders are not enabled. So we're actually going to enable that. So we'll put in here forwarders space open parentheses new line, and we go to under the R of forwarders and we'll put in here the 2 addresses 8.8.8.8 semicolon, important, don't forget that. And underneath there we'll put 8.8.4.4 semicolon new line close parentheses semicolon. Now we can actually save and exit the file. So as I'm using vi, I'm going to do escape :WQ and exit the file. The next file we actually need to configure is named.conf.local. Again, this is in the /etc/bind directory. So as always for me, I'm going to sudo vi this file. So sudo vi named.conf.local and let's put in my password. And here we see the contents of the file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bottom of the file and here I'm going to type zone. Now it's very important that what we're doing here is we are basically making up an FQDN. I'm just making one up here, okay? It's as simple as that. I'm just making it up. So I'm going to put in here zone, open speech marks, and I'm going to put the name of my server. So I'm going to put DNS server dot, and remember this is a made up FQDN, tubetech.example.com, and I'm going to close speech marks. I'm going to put a space, then I'm going to open the parentheses. I am going to tab across one, and I'm going to put in here type primary, semicolon, new line, and in here I'm going to put file open speech marks / etc. / bind / zones / and as it's going to be a database, I'm simply going to call it DB and then exactly what I've called the zone above, so the DNS server.tubetech, etc. So let's put in there db.dnsserver.tubetech.example.com, close speech marks, semicolon, new line, tab across, allow, transfer, space, open parentheses. We're only going to allow transfer of or to this private address of the DNS server that we're actually on at the moment. So we're going to put in here 192.168.56.60, semicolon, space, close parentheses, semicolon. Then we need to close parentheses and put a semicolon. Now in here what we'll do is we'll just tab across and we'll put a description in here for each section. So let's put a description here. This is the primary zone. We'll tab across on this one. This is the zone file path. It's going to be a file that we're going to create with that name, if you remember, that'll house all of our A records, etc. This is the private address of DNS server, and we'll go down a couple of lines. Now we can save and close this file now. So I'm going to do escape : WQ, and that's that file for the moment finished with. Before we continue, we need to do a quick cat of the named.conf.local file, which is the file that we've just finished configuring. So if we do a cat named.conf.local and we have a look, the file we need to create in a moment will be this file here. So it'll actually be called the FQDN name required because that's what we're calling. We don't currently have a zones directory as we see from this listing. There is no zones directory. So let's go ahead and make that. So we'll do a sudo make dir zones. And we need that because we've listed it here, look, as zones. It's important to note at this point that to create this file, we need to copy db.local into this file as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll sudo cp for copy db.local, and we want to copy it into this directory. So to make it easy, I'm just going to copy this and paste. And we have completed that. And if we do a cd zones, so we browse to zones and we do an ls, we note that our file is there ready for our next step to configure. Right, let's get on with configuring our db.dnsserver.tubetech.example.com file. So we'll do a sudo vi db and then tab it. That's all you need to do. And we'll enter the password. And here we are taking our first look at our DB file. Now, obviously, we need to make quite a few configuration changes and add some configuration in this actual file. So for the moment, what we're going to do is we're going to make those changes, and then I'll explain after we've made those changes what each section in this file is doing so that you can then make noted changes that you need for your particular system. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to escape I for an insert because I'm using vi. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go to this SOA area and the local host. Now the dot we need to keep, so we need to remove local host. And in here we need to put our full FQDN. So for the moment I'm going to put in here DNS server.tubetech.example.com with a dot on the end. This next section is exactly the same. So we need to keep the dot there, but we put admin at the front, but the rest of it is the same. So we can do admin dot, then I can take this and I can just paste it in over there because it's exactly the same except for the admin section at the front. The TTL above, I'm going to change to 86400 to be 1 day. So 86400. I'm going to change the serial number to be a date, today's date, with a number at the end. And there's a reason for that, and I will explain that later. So 20250305 and the number 01. And we need to keep this lined up. So let's line this up like so. Refresh, I'm going to change to 3600. 3600. Again, it needs to be kept in line. I'm changing the retry to 1600. Again, let's keep that lined up. I'm going to change the expire to be 604800. Let's keep that lined up. And the negative cache TTL will be the same as the TTL, 86400. And that's the SOA section changed. Now we move on to adding our actual name servers. So what we can do here is there's a comment here. So the semicolon there in this particular file stands for a comment. So what I'm going to type in here is name-server-ns records. So it's the records for our actual name servers. Now I only have the one server, so I only have to put one entry in here. You may have more and may have to put more entries in. So I'm going to remove all of this because it's not required. And what we need to do is tab across one, put in, tab across one, NS, tab across one, and we need the name of the server and the fully qualified domain name which we entered above. So for me it would be DNS server dot, and then I can copy the rest from up here. But we must have that dot on the end, remember? So we'll put that in there. Now you may have more than just that one that you need to enter here. So you put the name in, followed by the FQDN. For me, that finishes or resolves the name server section and the NS records. Now we're going to add our actual A records. So we go down twice. I'm going to put a semicolon in so that we can say in here name server -A records. And we enter. And we start by putting the name of the system and the FQDN after it. So for me, the first one is going to be the actual DNS server. So I know I can copy this. We must, again, make sure the dot is there. So I copy that and I type in, tab A, because it's an A record, and now I have to put the IP address. 192.168.56.60. And I also have my client, which is dnsclient1.tubetech.example.com. And we need to put the dot on the end again. And we need to go across to the in, then the A, then the IP address, 192.168.56.61. Now, for me, that is my two A records added, and I can actually save and exit this file, which is what I'm going to do now. Escape:/WQ saves it for me and exit. Now we need to restart our bind9 DNS service. So we can do a sudo systemctl restart bind9, and that will restart the service. We can also check that it's running okay by doing a status, and that tells us that it's active and running. So that's the restart of the DNS server. On the DNS client, we have to check our name servers on the netplan, because if you remember, at the moment we have them as 8.8.8.8 and 8.8.4.4, which are Google's DNS server addressing. So let's have a quick look at what we need to change. So we'll do a sudo vi /etc/netplan/ and it always begins with 0. So there's a 0, tab, enter our password, and it's this section here you need to change. You need to change it to the address of your new name server. Leave the other addresses out because we need to test this server. I've already made the change here. Escape:/Q for me. I don't need to save it. Now to test this, I can type nslookup, and I can put in here server 192.168.56.60, so that's the server I want to use, and it tells me that's the default server, and that's fine. That's the address I want to use. What's the address of dnsserver.tubetech.example.com? And it gives me it back. There we go. It tells me what the address is. Okay, what's the address of DNS client 1.dnsserver.tubetech.example.com? And there we go. It tells me that it is 61. Another test that we can use to ensure that our DNS server configuration and operation is successful is we can simply perform a ping test to the DNS server's FQDN from our DNS client. So we're on the DNS client, so let's perform sudo ping dnsserver.dnsserver.tubetech.example.com, and we get back exactly what we expect, the IP address, and yet we have pinged the FQDN. That confirms successful configuration and operational service of a basic DNS server with bind. I've taken you back to the DNS server because we need to cat our DB file so that I can explain the SOA areas and what the different lines indicate and mean. So let's cat DB and we'll have a look at this and we'll explain what each line does. So the TTL, which is at the top here, is actually the default time to live for all records in seconds. This means the cached DNS records will expire after this timer runs out, 24 hours. At in SOA, so the at here, is the start of authority record, and it defines the primary DNS server for the zone. In my case, primary DNS server is dnsserver.tubetech.example.com. Admin.mynetwork.local, or in my case, admin.dnsserver.tubetech.example.com. Email address of the DNS admin. The serial number. This is important because remember I said we put a number in there at the end. So I've put a date of 2025-03-05 with a number of 03 on the end. Every time you make a change to this particular file and you have to save it, you have to update or increment this number. And it's easier to just do it from a number on the end rather than the whole number. The refresh is how often in seconds the secondary DNS server should check for updates. The retry is how often a failed refresh attempt should be retried. Expire, how long secondary servers should keep trying before giving up. And the minimum TTL is the default time for negative caching. Now, the rest of the information in this file is self-explanatory and we explained it as we configured the actual file. So for now, we're going to go back to the whiteboard and we'll just summarize what we've completed within this video.
Let's summarise what we learned in today's lesson, which was video 1 of DNS bind installation. So we installed bind9, bind9 utils and bind9-doc. We also configured the following files that I've already put up on there, which is etc bind named.conf.options, etc bind named.conf.local and db.tubetech.example.com, which was our master file. To test, we utilised nslookup and traceroute to the FQDN of the DNS server from DNS client 1. Now, in the next video, we'll be looking at configuring reverse DNS and testing the results. So we hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you when our latest videos are released. The following link is going to put in the video description anyway, but you can follow us on Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/tubetech tutorials. See you there and see you at the next video. Have a great day. Bye bye.